Okay, great to have you join us. Thanks so much for taking some time to join us. First, let's just kind of talk a little bit about you and your background and how you became such a viral sensation on TikTok, helping people with their finances.
Sure. Well, thank you, Heather. I started our TikTok channel a couple of years ago, and it was at the height of the pandemic. And I had just joined the marketing team. And I was thinking, there's this app. People seem to do trends and dance on there. Like, I feel like that would be a good place to teach social or to teach personal finance, right? And, our team had some doubts. I even had some of my own, but I decided to give it a try. And here we are a couple of years later now with 500,000 followers. People seem to really resonate with it, especially during the pandemic time. And I've just been trying to teach bite-sized pieces that people can really digest to take control of their money.
Yeah, are you inspired just by topics that you come up with yourself? Do you kind of hear from people about what kinds of things they need help with?
I'm mostly inspired by the YNAB method, the method that we teach over at YNAB, because it helped me take control of my money. And I just want to help other people do the same. And then I'm kind of inspired by other people on the app and questions that they ask in the comments and things like that. So my content is really built around all of those things.
Wonderful. Well, let's dive into one of the biggies that everybody's struggling with, and that's the ever growing grocery bill as we're still dealing with inflation at the grocery store. So, just walk us through some of your steps to help. It sounds like you really cut your grocery bill down.
I did. It was intense, but I'm so glad I didn't. Back then, I started this about a year ago, and I'm so glad I did then because inflation has only grown, more so since then. And so I'm glad I built the habits so I don't have to start from zero. So I was spending way more than I wanted to on groceries. And I decided, this does not fit in with my priorities, with the rest of my budget. I'm not spending how I want to. And so I decided to take control of that and do an experiment where I tried to spend as little as possible on groceries. And I had my whole TikTok clan helping me with that as well. So they were offering me tips and advice. And what went from a 1 month experiment turned into a 2 month experiment, turned into the rest of 2022, basically. And it was a really fun thing to do. I'm so glad I did it. And I learned a lot along the way.
Wow. Well, walk us through what steps did you take?
So the first thing I did is I went through my fridge and my pantry and I took everything out and I made an inventory of everything I had. And I realized I was going to go to the grocery store today, but I have a whole grocery store in my pantry, in my fridge. And so I decided to use what I have on hand first and tried to extend the time between grocery shopping trips. So that was my first step, was just to shop less. And then the second step was to change where I shopped. So a lot of my TikTok followers were suggesting Aldi. And so I tried Aldi and I did notice that they do a really good job keeping their prices lower. And so that really helped as well. And then I also just changed how I shopped. I changed how I cooked. A lot of things changed. I built healthier habits around everything.
Okay. Well, let's start with the changes that you made to how you shop. What did you change?
So I noticed that before the experiment, I was spending so much money on produce. I would buy a lot of fresh produce all at the same time. And then, it was just every month I was noticing that I wasn't eating it. There was a lot that was going to waste, and I felt bad. I was having to throw out a lot of produce at one time because I wasn't using it. So I cut down on the amount of fresh produce that I was using, and I only bought a little bit at a time. And that really seemed to help. I also made an intentional list based off of the food that I already had on hand and then meal plans that I was making. And so I went to the grocery store with a plan already, and I tried not to deviate from that list. So those were two big changes that I made.
Okay. And then how did you make changes to the way that you cook?
So I started making what I call my three purpose meals, and I would cook a large batch of food all at once. And then I would use some for dinner that night. We would save some for lunch the next day, and then we would freeze the rest to use at a different date when maybe we didn't have time to cook. And I found that cooking in larger batches really was the biggest help for me. And especially as a busy working mom, it helped me to stretch the food that I use, actually use the ingredients that I have. And another thing that changed is I made a little box called the Eat Me First box, and I put it in the fridge. And every time I would clean out the fridge, I'd put the food that needed to be used up first, and I made sure to prioritize that when I was cooking.
That's a good idea. Oh, you touched on freezing some of the food that you're making. What are some of your other tips to just help make sure that we're making our food last longer so that we're not having to throw it out?
Sure. So one of the things I started to do with the fresh produce is I would actually cut it up and put it into containers, like wash it up, make sure that it was being used up first. So I would put it front and center. So before I used to put my fresh produce in the drawer, but now I actually keep it very visible in the front of my fridge so that that's the first thing being consumed first. So just the tiny tweaks to how I organize the fridge has really helped.
Okay. What do you think people are wasting the most money on or frequently wasting money on when we go to the grocery store?
I think it's a combination of two things. One, it's the food that you don't eat, right? It's the food that goes bad. So anything that you're buying and then ending up throwing away, that's going to be the biggest waste of your money. But also another thing is just the impulse shopping that you can do at the grocery store. Going in, thinking you have kind of a list in mind of what you want, but then you go around the grocery store. Grocery stores are designed to make you buy things on impulse, and it's so that it's those impulse purchases on the end caps, just grabbing that snack that looks good. Also things maybe like single packaged items versus buying in bulk. So now instead of getting the little cheese crackers that are each in individual bags, I'll get a big box of it and I'll put it in little Ziploc bags. I'll separate it for my kids. So just things like that.
Let's talk a little bit more about bulk because I think bulk kind of intimidates some people about, I don't want to buy too much of this stuff. How do I know if I'm going to use it? What do you think are good investments in buying in bulk?
That's a really good question. I think one of the best investments for something that you would buy in bulk would be food pantries. Uh, I'm going to start that one over.
That's fine.
Shelf stable pantry items that you know that your family will eat. So for us, I buy rice in bulk because my family loves rice, and buying larger bags of rice actually saves money than buying smaller bags. So whatever your family will eat and something that is shelf stable. Start with one thing, and then if you find it works for you, move on to the next.
Okay. What's your tactic for just kind of keeping track of your spending, knowing when you're kind of spending too much or maybe you have a little room?
So I use the money management app called YNAB. It's the app that we love and we share. I use YNAB to track my grocery spending. Not only track it, but I plan my spending in it as well. So I start the month with a specific grocery budget. I have the money set aside, and then throughout the month, I track all of the spending that I make at the grocery store. Every time I spend, the budget will update me and tell me how much I have left for the rest of the month. And that just really helps me with being intentional about when, where, how I spend.
So what kind of a difference have you seen this make overall in your monthly spending? Like what were you spending before and how's it going now?
So when I started the experiment last year, I was spending over $1,200 a month on groceries for my family of four. And the first month of the experiment, I spent less than 400. And for the entire year, I found that my average spending was around $400 a month. So it really made a big difference. I would say now with grocery prices going up a little bit, I'm at around the 600 mark, but it's much less than that original 1,200.
Yeah, and we all feel you. We all seen it go up no matter what you do. Well, this is fantastic information. I'm sure people are going to want to follow you to keep learning more. How can people follow you to be able to get the latest updates?
Sure. Well, we are at You Need a Budget on TikTok, also on all the social medias. You can also just check out our website. It's ynab.com, ynab.com. Check us out there. There's a free 34-day trial of the app that I use to track my grocery spending and all of my spending.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, it was so great to talk to you. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks so much, Heather. This was great to talk to you as well.